Welcome to episode 51 of Military Veterans Podcast, where we talk to veterans to learn about their stories and experiences. And today we're joined by Gary Prout.
How's it going, mate?
It's going good, mate. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Long time no see.
It is, isn't it?
It's been too long.
How many years has it been?
I reckon it was 2015.
You reckon, yeah?
Yeah,
It's a
2015.
long time ago.
Andover area, yeah. Doing a bit of
ago.
archery, wasn't it, I think?
But thank you very much for letting me come and find you in this part of the country and get set up in your home. This is quite a important episode, especially for me personally. I've been wanting you to come on this show since the very beginning of me creating this. So I'm really excited to hear your journey. Okay. And whilst we were setting up, we did the first TikTok live, which is pretty cool. So.
I've been on TikTok. It's been a moment of first, a day of first. So
massively. And this does mark the beginning of year 5 for the podcast.
Insane, mate.
So
insane.
It's crazy.
Congratulations to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So just started year 5. So I've had the fourth birthday. I think this comes out. But yeah, it's really cool. So let's get going. I'm getting carried away already.
Do it.
So we're going to break this down to the questions, summary of what we're going to go into for your episode. So for you, Gary, I will break them down to pairs.
Sweet.
So the first 2 questions are, when did you join and what service and branch did you join?
Nice. Simple question, strange answer. I actually joined the military twice. So the first time I joined was in, I think it was October 99. I went through depot in Purbright. I got all the way to the leaving week of phase 2 in and around about May time, I think it was 2000. And then I decided the military wasn't for me. So I binned it off. And then I joined back up again it would have been February 2004. Branch was the same both times. I joined the Army, British Army, and I went to the Royal Regiment of Artillery. Very important I say Royal Regiment because we are the Royal Regiment of Artillery.
I'm sure people listening to this have got many nicknames for the artillery, but Royal...
Not today, the Royal Regiment we are.
Fantastic. And the next 2 questions are, how long did you serve for and what rank did you get to?
Fantastic. So served in total 12 years. Served all the way up until 2015, I think it was. Christmas Eve 2015 was my final day. And I operated at the fantastic rank of Bombardier. So corporal for all of you guys who weren't in the Royal Regiment. But that two stripes. Junior non-commissioned officer.
Nice. And I'm glad you said about the corporal aspect because there is, isn't there? There's a few regiments that have different names for the same rank. But
not going to lie, I've been confused with a brigadier before I've actually been named as a brigadier. It's a bombardier.
Amazing. Well, let's rewind the clock. Where were you born and where did you grow up?
Cool. So I was born in West Germany. My father was in British Army on the Rhine. Born in 1982 in a little town called Iserlohn. And then quite soon after, we actually moved to Northern Ireland, hence the accent. So my father actually met my mother on patrol in Northern Ireland. And he was finishing off his years. He served 17 years in the Royal Engineers. And as he was finishing off, they wanted to settle in Northern Ireland. So settled down just outside Lisburn. And spent all of my kind of formative years growing up just outside Belfast.
Nice. So your father was in the proper corps, which is and how was like childhood for you growing up in that area?
Yeah, so we had a lot of military influence in the area, and it sounds bizarre. I watched a TV show recently called Once Upon a Time. And it actually highlights how much exposure we had to the Troubles. So growing up through the 80s in Northern Ireland, whenever you're isolated in that kind of bubble, you think it's very normal. And, we would always say that we were removed a little bit from the issues that were going on over there themselves. But actually, as I was watching that TV show and I was watching it here with my parents, we were realizing there's an actual lot of exposure to it. So, for example, I would go down to one of the main military bases in our area and I'd wait for the soldiers to come out on patrol and I'd actually hard target with them. Really? As they broke cover from the main gates. I would go out on patrol with them and, I'd just be kind of out with them all the time. And to me, the British Army were very needed in Northern Ireland, because to me they brought this layer of protection. They created a wall between two sides of the community doing awful stuff to one another, and I always remember seeing them in this fantastic light. Always helps up. I was fourth generation within the military myself, so it's strange looking back on it, mate. It's like a different life. Yeah.
It's crazy that you were like so exposed but so into it that you wanted to do that kind of stuff. Did you ever do cadets or anything like that?
So no,
because I don't know. Did they have cadets over?
We did, but there was always this belief of if you would go to stuff like cadets, you were almost exposing yourself to a potential threat. So if you were going to military camps, so whenever my brother was on tours in Northern Ireland, we would rarely go to see him, and he would rarely come to see us, because there's just that chance of any kind of interception in between the base and home and stuff. So always kept ourselves a little bit distanced from any military activities, in particular cadets or anything like that there. But I really didn't need it. I knew about weapon systems and everything from just going out on patrol. It was quite surprising how much I knew, and I always had it in my head that I was going to join up at some point. And signed the line whenever I was at the grand old age of 16 to join up.
Where was that? Where did you sign on? Was it at school, or because I know that some, like in my time, we had like loads of army people come to my school to like give us information and give us cards to when you sign on, make sure you let them know that it was me and I get this and that. How did it work for you?
So initially, what you have to do is, what I had to do back then was phone up the recruiting office, because they didn't have any open access recruiting offices that you could go to. They'd then send you out a pack, and you then got security vetted. So I was actually only 15 whenever I got the paperwork through to join the military. I had to fill in all of my family history, all of my family members. It then goes into a vetting process, and around about 6 to 9 months later, you then get the thumbs up that you're to go to the barracks in order to have your first interviews.
Oh, really?
So, that in itself is an experience, because you're going into a cordoned, controlled area. So just getting down to where it was in Palace Barracks, multiple buses. I wouldn't get any taxis, because those people, who are from Belfast and know Belfast know that if you ask a taxi to go to a certain location and it's the wrong taxi, again, that can expose you. So it was constant buses, trains out to the area, long walks from where you got dropped off, just trying not to make it obvious of where you were going to, and you'd actually go up to there in order to sit the barb test and to go through all of the kind of preliminary parts of joining the military. So it's quite a task in itself.
I was going to say, and none of that fazed you though. You definitely wanted to do it.
It's kind of exciting in a way, mate.
Yeah.
It's those little kind of little touch points that kind of lead to it. And I suppose it's good in a way, because it weeds out the wheat from the chaff in some way. Some people go through the process, and you probably experience it yourself, where they probably say they want to be within the military without actually wanting to be within the military. Over there, it's very hard to get through the process, because there's just so many hurdles to jump. So it signifies that you're serious and you genuinely want to do it.
And how about joining that part of the military? One, the army, and two, the royal thing that you mentioned.
The Royal Regiment. So my dad was engineers. His father was in the Royal Artillery. And then his father was also in the Royal Artillery as well.
Okay.
So my brother, he's 9 years older than me. He joined the army in '88. He's actually still serving to this day, and I'd always kind of had the Royal Artillery in mind. So yeah, it was something that was always in and around. Anytime the artillery came to the barracks I was talking about earlier on, I'd always see the cap badge. I'd always chatting with them that my brother's in such and such a regiment, and somebody would know somebody, so yeah, it just felt natural to go to the gunners.
That's fair enough. And so once you sign on and you get the, I guess, date that you're going to go and do your initial training, what happens with you heading over to the UK? Because I'm guessing you did that within, well, should I say mainland England, rather than UK, because obviously Northern Ireland is part of the UK. Where do you go, and how was that for you?
First time I can remember being on a plane.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Wow.
so you get these things, we receive these things called signals. And basically, it said that you have to report to this airport. I believe it's all pretty open source now. You have to report to Smith Airlines, and Smith Airlines will then allocate you a ticket. So this is the little military wing that used to sit constantly within one of the airports in Northern Ireland. So you'd go down there, you'd report to them. Once you got to the other side, you'd then report to the train station. They would give you the rail warrants. And it was an absolute nightmare getting from Northern Ireland with all of your padlocks, all of your coat hangers, all of that equipment, all of that stuff. It was a bit of a jockey. And, simple things like getting through to London and then trying to figure out how the underground works, trying to figure out how the train lines work, because I've never been before,
First time there as well.
Yeah,
Wow.
late 90s, mate. I'm not going to lie. Walking up the people in these security areas with a pure Belfast accent, asking these things, I felt a little bit uncomfortable, because there was still a credible threat on some of those occasions, So yeah, it was a completely different world. Completely different world. We've got a couple of train lines. They run from A to B, in Northern Ireland, and that is it. So, yeah, I was absolutely a fish out of water. One big adventure, mate.
And where did you head to? Where was basic training for you?
So it was at Prout. So we were going to Brookwood, and that was an experience in itself, because I got to Brookwood, and I can remember stood there, and there were people with like ironing boards and stuff like that there, obviously going to camp, but not wanting to say to them, are you going to the British Army? Because where I'm from, nobody would ever say that they were actually going to the camps or anything. So I can just remember being stood there and a bus rocked up, and this corporal jumped off, and he turned around and he looked up at me and he went, name? And I went, Gary. And he went, what? And I went, Gary. And he went, if I wanted your fucking first name, I would have asked you for it. And I was like, Prout, sir. Call me, sir. And I was just there like, I can remember getting on the bus and just feeling battered and bruised already, thinking, what have I done? What have I done? But it's that shock of capture moment, and they did it fantastically. But yeah, just a bus full of young, I was going to say men, but I was still a child in a oversized shirt with a tie that's probably tied in a knot, not even tied up properly, just trying to look like I'm not intimidated and being completely intimidated. Fascinating.
Oh, great. Yeah, because you were 16, weren't you, when you joined? And yeah, wow, that's mental. Because I'm just going off on a tangent here. So most people within like England, Wales, Scotland, right? They're used to getting on a train potentially and then head down to London. You've got on your first flight over to an area with more frickin' railways than you've seen before, and then you've got to deal with like military people having a go at you.
And no mobile phones,
16.
mate. No mobile phones.
And no mobile phones.
No internet, nothing like that there. I had a couple of telephone numbers that were written on the signal. And that was it.
Yeah.
Absolutely shit bust. So,
Yeah.
you're thinking that's all right. So you can phone somebody. Don't know where the phone box is there.
No.
You're going along on a train and you're hypersensitive because you're watching every single stop because you don't know when Brookwood's coming up. All of a sudden it's going to pop up. You just know it's going to be one of the stops,
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Wow.
it's hard. Whenever I look back on it now, you have to remember all of those little things that make such a big difference,
Massively.
And like now if I'm going to a train station, I Google map it.
Yeah.
I have a look. I see what it looks like. It's easy.
Massively. I think 99 was the first year I got an email address.
Yeah, mine was 2003, mate. So.
Oh, crazy. So you're at Purbright. What's it like for you? Standout moments from basic training?
First time through.
Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot that.
Yeah. First time through. I can remember looking back on it, way too immature. As in, I just didn't own the military training process, if that makes sense. So I was extremely fit. I was a cracking shot. So I actually won one of the the Purbright wide competition. So not just within my platoon or my squadron, it was within the whole of Purbright. We'd done this massive march and shoot competition, and at that time, we were there with both the kind of combat support and the combat arms were there. So the infantry were actually training there. They had the guards platoons there. So that was the biggest standout moment whenever that got announced that I'd won it. And I can remember it's cheesy looking back on it now, but at the time, my platoon commander got me to march the whole. I was in an RLC squadron at the time, and he got me to march the whole squadron back, kind of thing, you know. So that was probably the biggest standout moment within there. I then went to phase 2, mate, and that immaturity, I really struggled on my communications course, and this will become quite fascinating later on. So within the military, you tend to go down 2 routes. You either tend to go down the gunnery route, where you're learning the weapon systems themselves, the artillery pieces, or the air defense equipment, or you go down the signals route. Both of them are absolutely critical to work within the artillery. Because I scored higher on the aptitude tests, they naturally tend to funnel those people into the signals route. And within gunnery signals, they have a thing called voice procedure, which is about if you say this, then I need to repeat with this, I need to reply with this. And it's almost like learning a language.
Okay.
And whenever it came to that communications piece, mate, I have never experienced such like allostatic load moments in all of my life. It was like somebody was saying something and my brain just could not process what it was I needed to say. And I think this was a bit of maturity, but I also think it was to do with age and, you know, your brain synapses being able to fire in the right way. But I can just remember scraping through by the skin of my teeth on that course and being like, I never want to do this in my life. And then realizing that the rest of my military career would be based in and around comms, and I was just like, nah.
Really? Okay.
I'm done, yeah. So that was a bit of an incentive to me pulling the pin on that first time, but also was really homesick, mate. I didn't think the army was right for me, so I turned round in leaving week, which is the final week that I had before I was going into the field army. It's all about administration, handing back all of my training equipment and getting me set up to go to regimental life. And I turned around and went, I want to bin it. And the artillery were fantastic at the time. Like the commanding officer, everybody had me in their office and everything, and they were like, we can't believe that you're in leaving week. And I think it was my battery sergeant major, so the senior warrant officer in charge of the training group I was in. He phoned up my brother, and he turned around to my brother, who was a staff sergeant at the time. He might have been a sergeant at Harrogate. And he turned around and he went, I can lose his paperwork, and by the time he fills it out again, he will be past the discharge as a right window. What do you want me to do? And my brother was like, he's an adult, isn't he? You know, I was 17 at that point. He was 17. Let him choose. So that was the incentive for me to go through. So they just thought I was making the worst decision of my life and didn't want me to leave. But then whenever I joined back up again, I went to the phase 1 training. The training team, they tried to accelerate me through because I'd already passed all of that CMSR piece, that the military syllabus for recruits. Because I'd been out for 4 years, they weren't allowed to, so they kind of kept me within it. But we're getting a bit of a background there, a bit of technology there. I swear I turned that down. But there was this thing about me being out for 4 years, so they did not know. They did not think that they could put me through. I had to go through all of phase 1 again. And mate, I absolutely loved that phase 1 training on the second time through.
Because you were like prepared for it.
I knew there was a process behind it. I knew there was a reason why you would be getting thrashed on this day, and you know what it was building you up for. And if I had known that first time round, I think that I think that would have been really, really powerful, you know. And it's, I'll be really honest. The first time I went through training, I probably describe quite a few of the instructors as bullies.
Okay.
It was awful. And the second time I went through, there was a very different attitude and belief of the instructors. So the first time I went through, deep cut happened.
Okay.
That was in the height of it. And I don't know if you know Prout, but it joins on to the camp where deep cut happened. And it was horrific. It was horrific. Versus the second time whenever I went through, all of a sudden I felt like we were genuinely being built up as soldiers. The first time it was a thrashing. The second time it was a build-up process. And simple things like I got to the end of phase 1 and I didn't know simple things like the first time through I didn't know the section battle drills. I didn't know anything like porpoisal. I didn't know the values and standards of the British Army. The second time, God, I don't know how they managed to fit it in such a short 12-week period, but they turned out what I would grade as far greater soldiers than the old school mentality. The old school shite of bullying. For me, it didn't work. That new school way of, you're going to get thrashed, but there's method behind the madness, you know, and it was incredible. And then whenever I went to phase 2, compare and contrast phase 2 me 4 years after, voice procedure, mate, it was an absolute doddle. So we would have serials like where I'd see the first line of the serial come across and I'd write it down and I'd be like, oh, they're going to do a time check, and I would already be able to prepare it. It's just like it's like learning to read, and you know, sounding out the words, and then all of a sudden the words just make sense and you no longer have to sound them out. You know, that's what it was like. And I absolutely smashed through that command systems course the second time. It was unbelievable, the difference. And looking back on it, it really makes me reflect and think, you know, I don't see anything wrong with recruiting people at 17, at 16, but you know what? Are their brains ready for what we need them to do at that point? That would be my only question, you know?
Yeah.
Powerful.
Very, very. And I think if I had my time again, I'd probably go to Harrogate. You know, being 16, nearly 17, you're not really ready for it. But you know, Harrogate is essentially college, right? But I didn't know about it. Anyway, that's history. So with the time frame between you leaving initially and then joining back up, there's 4 years there. In that time, I'm guessing you did some civilian jobs. I'm guessing. And got your life back on track. And what was it that made you want to join back up and go through that again?
Yeah, so I was actually a personal trainer in a gym in Belfast. It was a cross community centre. So again, that kind of linked back to the Troubles and bringing young people from the two interfaces of Belfast together in a bit of a neutral environment. So it was a brilliant job. I loved it. I love the personal training vibe of it, you know, of being in and around people, running training courses and trying to help them. What really struck it was I walked into the gym one morning and the music wasn't on. And, well, one day, and whenever I actually walked in, because there was like this big glass wall, everybody was all stood around watching the TVs. And the TVs were actually turned up and it was 9/11 happening.
Okay.
Right in front of me. And it was a global organisation. It was the YMCA I was working for, global organisation. And we actually had a guy on placement from New York working with us. And I can remember being stood there and watching the second plane hit. And he turned around us and he was like, I need to go. And he went back to his home in Belfast. He was trying to phone through, couldn't get through to anybody. And just over the next couple of days, as the tempo built up and as everything, as we realised that it was a terrorist attack and, you know, there was real intent in behind this here, a few of the people who I went through basic training with, they were in the likes of 29 Commando. One of them was in the specialist battery they have down there, 148 battery, which is based down in Poole and does a lot of the naval gunfire support. They were a part of that initial force that got launched off. And I can remember thinking to myself, hope they really take this, the Al Qaeda here. And I can remember thinking to myself, well, if you feel so strongly about it, what are you going to do? And quite soon after 9/11, I made the phone call and I started the process. Now, because it's Northern Ireland again, and because I've been in and I've been out, I had to go through all the security process again. It took quite some time, and eventually it came round, and I was able to get back in. So the big kick up the backside to get me back in again was 9/11, mate.
Yeah. And that's taken years to get through the process. So that's crazy.
Yeah, I did grow up. So the estate where I grew up has quite a few people who would pop up on the security clearance. You know, so that there was a need to go through it.
Okay.
That sounds bad, but as with everybody who's from kind of Northern Ireland or North of Ireland, whatever people call it, lots of people will have those people in their estates, but our estate was so one-sided. It wasn't like a dangerous place. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So there were people who would be classed dangerous, but it wasn't a dangerous place to be. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, they just had to dot their I's and cross their T's and make sure I wasn't too intertwined with those influential people.
That's fair. Cool. So you're back. You complete training phase 1, phase 2. After phase 2, which is that Lark Hill? It is at Lark Hill.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Where'd you head to? Did you head to your first unit?
Straight to unit. I turned around to the people who sort out which unit you're going to get allocated to, and I said, which unit is the next unit on operational tour?
Okay. Yeah.
And they turned around and they went, well, you have to do all of this pre-deployment training first. The next unit is 19th Regiment, the Highland Gunners. So the Scottish Highland Gunners of the Royal Artillery. And I went, okay, I'll go there. And it just so happened that my brother was in that unit.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
But did you know that?
I did know that they were going, but I was more worried about the tour cycle.
Okay.
But it just so happened that, if you go to these ones, you're going to go straight onto your pre-deployment training. So you'll arrive at them in August, straight on the pre-deployment training, and you'll deploy in April next year.
Right.
And they said if you go to the other ones, you'll be arriving as they're going, and you'll be on rear party. So this is the first unit. So that was me. So I finished phase 2 in, I think it was mid-August. And then I started with my unit. I went straight on summer leave, and then I started with my unit at the end of August. And my first week, we packed all of our equipment and we flew to Canada. Went straight to Canada.
And that was for training?
That was straight on to BATUS.
Wow.
Yeah. So straight on to a full 7-8 week exercise out in the ground constantly for it. And I got allocated because of my performance on my artillery command systems on the signals piece. I got funneled straight into something that's called the observation posts. So traditionally back then you used to have FOO parties. So you would have 3 forward observation officer parties. The forward observation officer would be embedded within the infantry or the recce squadrons, the tank squadrons, and he would then call in the artillery according to what the ground commander needed on the ground. So you'd probably have about 7 people, all attached in with these combat arm groups, and their one job would be to call in the artillery. So I got funneled straight into them because of my performance in phase 2.
Eye opener.
Amazingly, mate. Yeah, it was insane. It was just the pace of things whenever you get to Canada, because you think you get to Canada and it's gonna be grand. As soon as you land, you're getting briefings on local wildlife. If this bites you, you're probably gonna die, and all stuff like that there. And I was like, is he taking a mick? And they're like, no, it's a black widow, mate. It's gonna hurt you if it bites you, And then it was straight from briefings down to sign over equipment and then running through equipment checks. And then you do that at your level. And then you do it at the vehicle commander's level. And then you do it at the food level. And then you do it at battery commander level. And then next minute, battle group commander's coming. And you're like, flip the neck, inspection for inspection. And then you're mucking in because the wagons are constantly going in Canada.
Yeah.
So everything's always broken. So you then go across to the guns and you'd help them track bash. And, and it was the first ever med man where we were rolling out bowmen.
Okay.
And traditionally, my food party would have worked off Warrior, but the Warrior hadn't been fitted yet. So they gave us a load of Land Rovers and they went, make these work. And we're trying to keep up with tanks and, stuff like that there. So there were just so many layers of, it was typical British Army of make it work. This shouldn't never work, but please make it work. And just going and making it happen. And the hours were insane. And I can remember getting up to the end of that pre-deployment piece and thinking, I need time out. And the exercise hadn't even started.
Wow. Okay.
So we were then straight off deploying onto the prairie for 6 weeks. And just sitting there thinking, whatever I pack here, this better be right, because nobody's coming back to this camp for this next long time, and that was a real eye opener of a feeling, mate. So yeah.
And you're like early 20s as well, right? So I'm guessing 22.
Yeah.
Do the maths, right?
Probably 22. I was 21, 22. No, 20. Yeah, 22 it would have been. Yeah. So.
Yeah. I'm one of the few British soldiers that never went to BATUS. I never went to Canada. So when I hear people that talk about it, I am a little bit jealous in some way because it sounds vast, it sounds immense, it sounds like the amount of equipment that you had out there to do all your training for 6 weeks is like crazy. Did you have like proper artillery stuff or was it just vehicles?
Yes.
You know what I mean?
So it kind of starts off with serials. So you start off at the low level and then gradually what you do is you ramp it up until you're at the full battle group level. So I kind of started off. It would have been all dry drills, so no weapons or equipment or anything, and it finishes off with an armored infantry company. We're on my left flank. We had a tank squadron on the right flank. I'm going up the middle with the infantry company, and we've got all of this overhead fire from tanks, from Warrior, all while we're doing like what was a coordination illumination mission. So a really complex mission where you're getting the illuminating round to burst in the air. And then about 10 seconds after the illume round goes off, you're then impacting with artillery so you can see where the artillery round lands. All while I've got like 3 radio sets in my head and it's just me, by the forward observation officer at the time. I've 0 skill set in this at the minute. So I know how to work a radio, but I don't know the intricacies of calling in artillery. And it was just phenomenal. And I love fireworks to this day, but no fireworks are anything in comparison to what I experienced on that. And you're getting quite close to the targets whenever they're calling the check fires. So the warriors, the tanks, the switch off into the distance. And it's just phenomenal watching these things zip past you and just smashing and creaming into the ground. It's phenomenal. Yeah. And then artillery landing dangerously close. Artillery's got this horrible ability where whenever we're doing the danger close, we tend to land at about 800 meters away and then slowly creep it in towards us. But I believe at about 450, 500 meters, all of a sudden it gets less and less impressive, so it looks less big. Okay. So it up to that point, you're like, oh shit, I need to get this right. And then after that, you're like, oh, it's okay. It's okay. And it's not until you hear the zip and the ping of the shrapnel actually buzzing over the top of you, you're like, you know what? We're within the safe splinter distance here. You know, we're potentially taking casualties here, and yeah, then having to make those adjustments. So yeah, it's unbelievable. And thinking 22-year-old people are responsible for doing that kind of stuff, that coordination. Oh,
amazing!
It's mad, but amazing. yeah, it's bizarre, mate.
And then after that, are you then deploying? So I'm guessing you get a bit of leave after Canada. Do you then head off to deploy, or
no? We went straight to Chepstow to do my all-arms search course.
Okay, right.
So came back from Canada, Chepstow with the Royal Engineers doing all-arms search course. I think that was about another 6 weeks, 5-6 weeks down there, and the IED threat was ramping up massively in Iraq at the time, and my team, basically what we had was 2 multiples from my small battery. So we lost all of our guns. We were only forward observation officers. So we had 2 multiples of about 12 people. And our task in Iraq was one was going to be the brigade escort multiple. So just any VIPs that came in, just being the people who knew Basra intimately to be able to escort them around. The other one was going to be the brigade commander's close protection multiple. So 12 mechanized brigade commander would have a multiple attached to his close protection team, the RMP close protection team. So those were the 2 tasks that we were set up with. But they wanted us to be multidisciplinary.
Okay.
So we got sent on the search course, and it was all of the old-fashioned search stuff, very based on Northern Ireland. So you had things like drop poles and grapple hooks and stuff like that to drag, and then house searches and stuff like that. They're looking for any kind of weapons caches or anything of importance where people would put it. And it was a great course. But there was 0 relevance to Iraq, if that makes sense. It was so focused on Op Banner in Northern Ireland and so far removed from Iraq. It's unreal looking back on it. But,
Yeah. You mentioning that just brought a memory back to me, and that was when I was in Iraq in 2004. So I guess a year. When did you deploy? Was it 2005?
2005, yeah.
Yeah, so
April,
a year before. So in 2004, they then brought over from Northern Ireland, because the IED threat was increasing, the Chub. Do I remember that rightly?
Yeah.
Correctly.
Yeah.
And it was literally people that would come from Northern Ireland, brought the Chub, and then literally just like briefed us in our cookhouse.
Yeah. It was so reactive. It was unbelievable, and we were getting constant updates from theatre. So there would be this there's a passive infrared threat now. So all of a sudden you were looking out for things that were beside the roadside that could set it off. We initially started off looking for any dug-in lines, any lateral lines along any prominent features. I can remember like being on one brief and they were like, oh, a telegraph pole, that can be a fantastic aiming marker to set off an IED. And then whenever you get onto a road in Iraq, there's 600 fucking lampposts between you and, so do we treat them all as vulnerable points, and aiming points? And I can just remember being like, all of this information's fantastic, but does it help the soldier who's on the ground? Probably not. Yeah. Probably not. Yeah. Very reactive stuff, mate.
Yeah, definitely. So your mindset with deploying, because you wanted that, right? You left Luck Hill and you were, I want to go somewhere that's going to deploy. You've done all that training in Canada and with the search team. So what's your mindset going out there?
I was buzzing, mate. Absolutely buzzing. Yeah, it's I knew what I was kind of hoping for, but I think it's a bit like being a nurse or being in the fire service or something. You kind of hope there's going to be a fire, and it's going to be shitty for the people whose house or property or stuff is burning, but you still want to do your job, and to be a nurse, people have to be sick, but you still want to do your job, but and that's pretty much the mindset. I'm a professional soldier. I want to do my job. I want to do my job. And then whenever the 2 roles got divvied out and I got attached into that close protection team, I can remember thinking to myself, what a job. Because, we had a couple of Mercedes G-Wagons. We would be in pretty comfortable environments. So, would always be in places where other people would provide security once we were in the main bases. If we were out on the ground and that was down to us completely. But, it was one of those jobs where there were a lot of perks and a lot of fun to be had and a lot of experiences. And yeah, it was how I managed to get that while I was in the artillery. It's just bizarre. It's not typically a job that gunners would get, but yeah, right place, right time, mate. And yeah, absolutely grabbed it with both hands.
How long was that tour for you?
So that tour was 6 months.
Yeah.
7 months, but in the August we lost Basra. There was a couple of incidents that led up to it. So essentially, the Al Qaeda or the Muqtada al-Sadr army, whatever you want to call them, they started deploying explosively formed projectiles. So that's essentially a mortar IED, a mortar bomb that whenever it fires off, it creates a copper, a molten copper jet that penetrates armor. And this was capable of defeating most of our vehicles. That's all I would be willing to say.
Okay.
But
yeah.
And even if it didn't defeat it, it would compromise the crew who were inside it. They were also deploying them in a way that lessened the likelihood of our electronic equipment being able to intercept and prevent the IED from going off. So with all of this going on and us starting to lose a lot of troops, the military and the government made a call of we need to capture these players who are putting these bombs on the ground because they weren't from Iraq. So we were involved in an operation that lifted those people because we were with the close protection team. We could be dragged and dropped, and we weren't part of any other conventional forces. So we were taken. We launched a operation. We were the escort and the part of the cordon for that operation. It was with some of the, not some of, it was with the most professional troops I've ever worked with, and we successfully grabbed those individuals. So that created a bit of a ruckus within the town.
Okay.
What happened was lots of checkpoints went up overnight. The Iraqi police, the Iraqi army were very pissed off that they were not informed, and there was fucking explosives and everything used on this night whenever we were lifting these people. Say we, I'm out of cordon, whenever our guys were lifting these people. And essentially they shut the town down. So we went quiet. We didn't go into the town. We left them to it. And as they shut the town down, 2 UKSF got compromised in town. Now, this is all over the newspapers. They were arrested. They were taken to one of the main locations. There just so happened to be a full squadron of UKSF in the area. They came down and they made the bold decision of going and rescuing them. So they took a load of armoured vehicles. They drove through walls. Our RSF troops who were prisoner of war, they'd been moved to another location. Thankfully, our guys managed to find out where they were and went and picked them up. But that 48 hours broke all liaison that we had with the Iraqi army, the Iraqi police, and we lost the town completely. In those hours. So it was just this thing of building up, EFPs, flipping other nations involved in creating these really effective bombs. We go snatch those people, and then poof, town's gone completely.
So how did your tour end? Because obviously that's pretty intense.
Yeah. So it started off with us in soft hats and the old floppy kind of hats and snatch vehicles along with the G-Wagons. It finished with us going nowhere unless we were in Warrior armoured vehicles or above, and just going from location to location and using mainly helicopters and having very, very little interaction. So it went from an okay-ish kind of place to be to, nah, you don't want to be here anymore. So we kind of left it at the back end of that, of us not really having too much influence, too much impact within the town. Yeah. bizarre one to leave on.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you come back, and I'm guessing your mindset's a little bit like, yeah. Well, I guess what is your mindset like? Holy shit, that was what I expected, or not what I expected.
So, mate, we were in Iraq thinking Iraq was the big thing. And then we started to get all of these trickles, all of these videos of like Parachute Regiment, Royal Irish on the rooftop in Sangin, giving it belt fed, with all of this cool flipping music going on in the background. And like we're counting our rounds in, we're counting our rounds out. If anybody fired a shot, there was a full shot report that had to go in about why you fired the shot, what the justification was, and everything. And then all of a sudden, we were watching people just putting belt after belt on the general purpose machine guns on rooftops in Afghanistan and just absolutely lacing it up. Trench warfare, bayonets fixed, lads walking with flipping belts draped around them, and we were there like, we thought Iraq was going to be this. What's going on over there? So all of a sudden, we were there like, when are we doing our Afghan? When's Afghan happening? And as soon as we came back, we got warned off immediately. Up Eric, 2007, deploying as a brigade. We're going to be changing the way we're working.
Okay.
So we went from that traditional warfighting element down into the FOB kind of piece within Afghanistan. And then that was whenever we started the ramp up training, everybody started talking about these fire support teams. We're like, well, we know how FOOs work, and we've got a TACP, a tactical air control party, who's loosely kind of attached to us, and we see them maybe once every 6 months. What do these FSTs mean? And they were like, well, in Afghanistan, what we need to do is have a joint effects ability to be able to coordinate and to bring all of these effects together. So say you're using an aircraft, you need to use the aircraft in such a way where the artillery, the aircraft, it all hits at the same time and you keep them apart. If you use mortars, artillery and aircraft, you have to use a system. We've got Cobras out there with the Americans, we've got Apaches out there. We need you guys to be the people who coordinate all of that.
Okay.
So overnight, essentially, we went from a 7-person team that controls just the artillery to being like a 5-person team that controls all offensive support weapons. So it was a bit of a shit. So how do we do this? And there was genuinely a bit of a not quite sure yet. We're going to base ourselves loosely off the U.S. Marine Corps Anglico teams, and that's how we're going to progress through here. So that was actually quite scary because I was only getting to grips with my job at the time, and then finding out that the world's going to be very different in the way we operate. That was quite formidable.
Did you have to go and do more courses before? Like you mentioned that, like how does it work? But did you go off and learn other things before you deployed to Afghan?
Yeah, so at this point, I'd done my basic forward observers course. And straight away, what they wanted to do was they wanted to get everybody up to a basic standard to be able to do stuff like emergency CAS. So like if you're really, really in trouble as an unauthorized observer, so as non-JTAC, you'll be able to control it and call it in. So we basically went on this constant cycle of going from training area to training area and just living out of our bags. And just running through all of these different ramp up and build up trainings that you could potentially do, simulators with Apache pilots, with gun crews and everything, and just trying to coordinate and integrate all of our weapons as much as possible. So I was doing all of that. I was doing my CARTA courses in order to get promoted. I then got attached to a tactical air control party, which was still within my battery, but it was just, again, looking back on it, the pace of things that's coming along. Tactical air control party, all of a sudden I'm listening and that voice procedure that I was talking about earlier on. Yeah. So, if somebody says over, you know exactly what they mean. If they say out, all of a sudden I was hearing these things like how copy. Got you 5-5 Lima Charlie, how me? And I'm like, how me? What does that even mean? And it just felt like I was having these off the cuff random conversations with people, and there was no real structure and no real format. But yeah, gradually over time, I was sat there rigid with my voice procedure, and all these people were talking in a really relaxed way. All of a sudden, it just suddenly started to come together again. And it's a bizarre world. It's people from my old world will tell you about this here. Whenever you're talking on the guns net, you're rigid, you're proper, and like, you know, some of the lines of the aim of fire discipline is that essentially I ask you for something and you provide it exactly as I have asked for it. And there was moments where I was talking on the airnet and the guy would be like, just tell me in plain speech, mate. Okay, yeah, it's a little bit rigid. It's a little bit too formal. Just tell me what it is you want from me. Just tell me naturally what it is you want.
So is this a pilot you're talking?
Yeah.
Directly to.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and yeah. So my TACP commander, he was a long-haired recce captain who was genuinely, on occasions, in a world of his own, as in you wouldn't have thought he was in the military.
Okay.
And really knew shit, you know, was all over it whenever it came to the TACP stuff, but quite unfazable, quite chilled out, quite relaxed, and on occasion you'd be like, you know, this is important. This is important, mate. You know, so yeah, it was bizarre, mate. It was honestly unbelievable. So that whole tour, I went into it with this. I kind of went in thinking going to be calling in artillery, and then whenever I went in, it was right out there, all the way from coordinating like rescue helicopters, you know, flipping mortars. So worked as liaison with U.S. Special Forces. Whenever I was working out of a particular base in Afghan and stuff like that there, and, you know, just having the exposure across that full range of capabilities was insane.
So did you practice the airnet before you deployed, of course? Good.
Yeah.
So and so the pilots are just much more chilled, or in some ways, or are they what can you say? Because I'd never spoke to anybody that's actually spoke in that context to a pilot.
Yeah, so whenever you're calling in a pilot, you're meant to have these key 9 lines of information. And like on the artillery net, like I would turn around and I would say, like, if I was talking to you as a guns, I would say, grid 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, direction 64, altitude 600. And you'd turn around to me, grid 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, direction 64. You'd repeat it line, exactly as I would say it. I'd turn around to these pilots and I'd give them the grid and I'd be reading it out all official. And then all of a sudden they'd just turn around, yeah, grid. And they'd just read it as if they were just on their Sunday drive, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, whereas the artillery net was rigid and we were like this here. And you'd have to remind yourself, they're fucking flying a jet up in that air up there, you know? And then you'd have to prompt them on some things like confirm IP, you know, the initial point where they're going to come in from and stuff like that there. And they'd be like, oh yeah, IP is, and you know, and they just blad it out. But it worked, and it worked really, really well. And anybody who just worked with air, they probably believe that it is quite rigid.
Okay.
But having come from the guns to working on air, it's very different. I won't say it's kind of lax and it's unprofessional, but it's just it's like a different world. It's like a different world. And then the worst thing that you do then is you then take your talk back to the guns net. So like if I'm doing a radio check on the guns, I'm like, hello 0, this is Alpha 10, radio check over, you know, and you know, that's what it's like. Whereas on the air, you turn around and you'd be like, comms check, high copy. You know, and then turn around and they go, got you Lima Charlie 5-5, got you loud and clear 5-5, how me? Yeah, got you loud and clear. So if you then turn around on the guns net and was like, yeah, comms check, high copy, they'd be like, get off this net now, you know. So
what does hard copy mean then?
Hard copy?
Yeah.
It just means it's solid. Yeah, we got you rigid. Yeah. Whereas in voice procedure, if you say Roger, that means I have received your transmission. That doesn't mean you understand it. It means I have received your transmission. You know, so
right.
so that's how finicky it is. And anytime we're doing any control or anything, we have to write all of this down. And the reason I believe that we have it in voice procedure in the artillery is you have to stand up and justify what each one of these statements mean and exactly what you said and what was said back to you.
Yeah.
Because you're defending yourself in a court of law. And then whenever it comes to the AirNet, I think it's open to interpretation. Some of the understanding is exactly hard copy, you know, got you leave it Charlie and all of this here stuff. Yeah. There is a bit of interpretation.
Wow. And the thing is, the crazy thing is, you're still in your 20s. Like you right? You're doing all this in your 20s.
I've been in the army 3 years.
3 years, and you're talking to frickin' fighter jets.
2 operational tours, running brigade level assets, you know, and allocating. One of the jobs of the TACP is whenever troops get into trouble, so those fire support teams, one of the first things we do is we speak to the likes of Widow Tuck, who was the big person who would allocate them. They would allocate the jets to us, and then we would then put the jets in the overhead and then assign them to the forward air controllers who were out on the ground. So it would be constantly trying to scramble these jets and bring them in. But what we would need to be aware of is if we're bringing any jets into their operating zone, you need to know what the max vertex height is of the guns, you know, where they're firing from and to, you know. So how am I going to offset these jets? Am I going to offset them by height? Am I going to offset them by space? There's some occasions where you might want to offset them by time. So you're actually going to bring them in to the point where the rounds would be. But all you're going to do is you're going to let the guns fire. You're going to put them on cease loading, and then you'll bring the jets in. So you can bring them all in and amongst one another. Mate, 25 years old, 24 years old, coordinating all of that stuff. And, you know, it's insane. It's insane.
Just remind me of your actual role. Mm-hmm. Remind me what that's called.
So I was in a fire support team. I was an assistant. By the time I finished the AC, as we call it. So my speciality within the fire support team was the artillery.
Okay.
So I was at the most advanced level of being able to call in artillery from multiple distances, multiple artillery pieces, and then having that decisive impact with it on the ground.
Yeah.
On top of that, I was I could control mortar fires. I could control precision weapon systems, so the likes of HIMARS and equipment like that there. I was a CCA controller, which is a bit like a forward air controller, but you tend to work with 5 lines. It tends to be a speciality with helicopters, but if needs must, you can then call in the aircraft to strike as well. So basically all of those big force multiplying weapon systems, it was my job to coordinate and integrate them with the troops on the ground as they were fighting.
Mental. Are you a Lance Jack, Lance Bombardier by now?
Yeah.
Good.
I think no, on that tour I wasn't.
On Afghan tour you weren't?
No.
Bloody hell.
I was a gunner doing a lot of that stuff. Now whenever I say I was doing a lot of that stuff, our NCOs in the fire support teams are incredible, mate.
Okay.
And our senior NCOs, everybody who's in this world, they don't happen to get there by chance. They are fucking fantastic people, and the bosses are amazing. The bosses are very different to they would be within the Green Military, and what I mean by that is like as a Lance Jack and being at that level of qualification within the artillery that I was calling in, there'd be occasions where the boss would just turn around to me and say, "You know more than me. Tell me what you're doing, and I'll keep the ground commander informed." So there'd be occasions where they would step back. And I used to like to think of them as a bit of a conductor of an orchestra.
Yeah, okay.
Each one of us have our instruments and we can play it brilliantly. And sometimes the boss's job is just to step back and to make sure that all of these pieces are playing brilliantly.
Yeah.
And that was how we tended to work on a lot of these occasions.
Okay. Deployment to Afghanistan, 2007?
Yeah.
What can you share from that? Was it another 6-month tour? Or
7 months.
It was 7-month tour. Okay.
It was insane. Yeah. I can remember arriving out there. We did a little bit of acclimatization, and then we were just on operations constantly across the whole of the AO. Lads fixing bayonets, clearing trenches. multiple ambushes, coordinated artillery missions. Before we went, we actually had an Australian who was in charge of a lot of the joint fire stuff that we done, and I think they used the Australians because they used so much danger close missions within Vietnam, so they were seen as knowing exactly how to do it.
Yep.
And essentially, danger close, I'll say 750 meters. And for obvious reasons, I'll not get into too much detail.
Yeah.
But if you're engaging artillery within 750 meters, there is a chance that a 0.001 chance that it can take your life. The shrapnel can come off at a certain angle, and there's a chance it will take your life. So what we have to do then is change how we would adjust it and call it in. So if my first round drops at 800 meters, I know that the enemy's 100 meters away from me. I know there's a 700 meter change in there. My next correction is going to be a drop 350. So I'm halving it. And I'm constantly halving it all the way down until it gets on top of the enemy position. So it's creeping it in. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and in the last time I believe the British Army had fired a danger close mission was 1982 in the Falklands War. Every single mission that we were firing in Afghanistan in 2007 was a danger close mission.
Okay.
And we went out there with guys who we had experienced a danger close mission in training. My God, mate, calling artillery within 50 meters of own troops. And you say 50 meters, artillery's actually got like this big sausage of death of where the round will land. You cannot guarantee where that bomb's going to land. And it's all things to do with like barrel wear, with like met in the air. If the air's denser in a certain pocket up in the air, it'll slow the round down quicker. And quite often that sausage depth can be around about 150 meters long. Okay. So even though they're calling it within 50 meters, there's absolutely a chance that round will drop on top of you and your mates, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. So whenever you tell the guns to fire, you've got maybe a 20-second window there where that round's in the air. And in that 20 seconds, you have no idea where that round's going to land. You have a good idea based on experience, but it could be that one that sits in that 0.5% down here that drops on your buddies. And that is the most horrific bit about being a forward observer. You can do everything absolutely right, and there will still be a chance that round drops off.
God.
Probable error in range was the big one. Probable error in deviation is where deflection is where it goes left and right. You've no control over that.
Wow. And that was, like you say, constant for pretty much your whole tour. Is there anything you can share from your tour that you want to?
Yeah, there was probably one powerful moment where for a couple of weeks before I'd been sat in a bit of an observation post in a place called PB Sanford, which was in between Sangin and Goreshk. And it was named after one of the lads from Two Mercian, who were the Woofers, the Worcestershire and Sherwood Foresters. He had been killed, sadly. And I was watching this enemy movement. Now, they were about 2.5 kilometres away, so they had no idea we were watching them. And we were able to see where their command centre was. We were able to see their logistics routes. We were able to see where they were building up their defensive. And if I'm really honest, they prepared the ground brilliantly. So they had guessed right our main effort direction, our axis of advance. But we then decided this was going to be our main effort for the end of the battle group, the big battle at the end of the tour. And I got tasked to go and drive for our commanding officer. And I would be working with his forward air controller because it was part of the TACP. So it would be the warrior driver, and it would also be the part of the TACP in the vehicle as well. And I can remember he's now Major General Lorimer, was the brigade commander at the time. He's now, I believe he's like the ambassador out on the Isle of Man. That's the job he does now. He's kind of civilian now. And he was talking through his orders, and I happened to turn around to my commanding officer at the minute, who's also quite a high ranking officer, I believe he's a Major General Bramble. And I turned around to the CEO and I said, "Sir, I've just been watching that area." And he went, "Oh, what do you think?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah." I was like, "That's where I remember the command cell being. These are the defensive positions." And he went, "Interesting." And he went over and he said something to the brigade commander, and the brigade commander was like, "Come on over." And I can remember being stood there as a private, briefing up the brigade commander on the enemy dispositions and where I believe that they were weakest, where I believe they were at their strengths, where we had probed them and where we had felt it. And he had all of this fantastic intelligence and everything before, but he still wanted to hear what I had been seeing and what I had been observing over the weeks before. And I can just remember thinking to myself, holy shit, that's pretty humble. That's pretty awesome. You know, that's pretty fascinating, wasn't it? You know, and it wasn't like he was just, it was, you know, "Oh, go on, just give me the information you have." He was genuinely asking me legit questions based off the back of it. So, you know, it was all of a sudden I realized the power that were within our teams, not just the effect that we could have on the ground, but for our information gathering, our intelligence gathering, and our surveillance of the battlefield. ISTAR, we tend to call it, intelligence, surveillance, and target acquisition. And so yeah, all of that stuff was extremely important whenever it came to the big picture stuff.
Wow. When you came back from Afghanistan, what age are you? Can you remember?
25.
25.
25, maybe.
Two operational tours under your belt, things like that happening to you. When you come back to the UK, what do you do next? Like, you've already done 2 massive tours.
About buzzing for my next one. So courses again, promotion courses. Went on a promotion course with an outside unit up in Otterburn. Passed that, did really well. I actually almost died whenever I came back from that tour.
From Afghanistan?
From Afghanistan, 2007.
Okay.
We were doing our decompression training. So we went to Cyprus. We had a bit of a jolly out there. And basically it was early days where I think the military I identified we need to create an intervention in between Afghanistan and home, because it's too much for these troops just to go straight from one to the other. So we went to a camp, Bloodhound, I think it's called, in Cyprus. They lock the gates, they fill it up full of beer, then they get a load of comedians to come in.
Yeah.
It was carnage. I've got photos of it from somewhere, but it was absolutely ruthless. I woke up in a drain the next morning and I looked around and there were just people laid all around me. Like, you know, we were just laid all over the place. And it was savage. And we then got back to the UK and we had a bit of a family day and a bit of a sports day event. And I was playing volleyball, mate, of all things. We were playing inter-battery competition. I dived for a volleyball and just landed flat on my side. Winded myself, mate. Got up, had to go off the pitch because I was winded, everybody laughing and everything. I was like, fuck, this is really bad. After about 10 minutes, it didn't clear up. So I went back down to the block. I went into my room and laid on my bed and I fell asleep. And I just remember my eyes popping open. And I can remember just feeling my heart absolutely pounding. And I was like, something's not right here. So I got up. I managed to take myself across to the med centre and I was like, I think I'm in shock. And they were like, what do you mean? And I was like, I was playing volleyball earlier. I said, I dived for the ball, I landed badly. I said, and my heart's just racing here. So they took my blood pressure. I had very little blood pressure. My heart was racing like 140, 150 beats a minute. And they were like, you're showing signs that you're in shock here. And I could just remember just my head falling back. And just like starting to lose consciousness and then them being like, let's get a fucking IV in them. So they put an IV straight into me. They phoned an ambulance, took me straight down to the hospital. And it turned out that I'd actually ruptured my spleen. So whenever I landed flat on my side, I'd ruptured my spleen. Now, it sounds bizarre, but whenever we were in Afghan, we were really struggling to get any food or water out to the troops. So whenever I came back, I was only 7.5 stone, mate. I'll give you a photo. I was tiny. There was nothing to me, completely wasted away. And I'd managed to rupture my spleen. And over the course of the next week, I'd had multiple blood transfusions. It was bizarre. My stomach was all distended because all of the blood was just going into my stomach cavity and just there. And there was one occasion where the lads came down. They thought it was on the up and up, and they were in chatting to me, and they came in to give me another pint of blood, and they put it into my arm. And I can remember sitting talking to the lads, and then all of a sudden the lads turned around to me and went, "Are you all right?" And I went, "Yeah, why?" And apparently the sweat just started running off me, and I just turned grey. And one of them turned around and was like, "I'm not happy." And he hit the buzzer. Tommy hit the buzzer, and then they came in, and the spleen had burst again. So it had popped again. So I was bleeding out in front of them all, and the last thing they remember was like this crash team just in and around me. And I think it was Tommy told me. I can remember looking up at the nurse, and like she was like, "Just keep your eyes open." And I was like, "I'm not very well, am I?" And she turned around and she said, "You're going to be all right." And apparently they were prepping me for the operation. They were going to take me in, going to remove my spleen. And if I had my spleen removed, that would have been the military game over, because apparently it produces lots of antibodies. I think it has an impact on white blood cells as well. And if that had happened, I would have been on medication for the rest of my life. Military career was done. But yeah, so to go from a ridiculously punchy operational tour to almost dying playing volleyball, it's a bit bizarre.
Mental.
Yeah. And the doctors, I remember the doctor saying, "You've not been beaten, have you?" I was like, "No." I was like, "I don't have a mark on me." And they were like, we normally see these injuries from car crashes, from like seatbelts and stuff like that there.
Crap, yeah.
They were like, "Yeah, and it's huge force, huge trauma." I was like, "I just like playing volleyball." I really like it.
Wow, mate. So I'm guessing you recover. What's next after you recover? Like, what brings you back to normality? So
in the recovery process, I actually went and I was the CO's driver for a bit. So whilst I was very quick to try to get back on my feet and stuff like that there. So to manage my recovery a little bit better, the regiment decided, let's put him in as Colonel Bramble at the time, his driver, and then we'll be able to keep a bit of a better eye on him. So I then became his driver for a bit, and then after that there, mate, I was back into the grind again because they had announced Afghanistan 2009.
Okay.
And I wanted to be the yak of a team. I wanted to be as qualified in calling in artillery as I could be, and I wanted to be out with an infantry company embedded with them for the full of the fighting of the Afghan summer out there again. It's just a concept. I don't know what it is. Operations are a bit of a drug
for you. Yeah.
Whenever you're there, don't get me wrong. It can be scary. It can be intimidating. You look forward to being home. The second you're removed from it, get me back out.
Okay.
Get me back out. Yeah. Let's go and pick a fight.
Now, before you do the training to go out to Afghanistan for the second time, are you doing something else to keep yourself going? I think you trial out for something, don't you?
Yeah. So I as a kid I was big into archery. So I actually got into archery in a roundabout way. Do you know those old fishing poles that you get, the old fishing nets? So I had one of them, and I thought to myself, wouldn't it be really cool if I stick a bit of a stick up the inside of it to reinforce it and turn this into a bow and arrow? So I done that there. I put this, I think it was like hazelwood, up the inside of this plastic PVA tube, and then a couple of notches at the top and bottom, and I made this bow and arrow. And then I thought, I need to make some arrows. And the problem I had was the arrows kept breaking. So my dad had a vice in the shed. So I got a load of 2Ps. And God bless the Queen. I love her. But I defaced her on these days. So I took a file to these 2Ps and I sharpened them into proper Native American style arrowheads. These things were as sharp as you like. And I was out in the backfield as a kid, probably about 10 years, 11 years old. And I was firing these arrows. Now, this was a council estate, and there was kids running all over the place. And I was just lobbing these arrows through the air. Next minute, a patrol came through, a military patrol. And they came over and they were like, "Oh, what are you doing?" I was like, "Oh, I've made this bow and arrow. Watch this." And I fired it into a tree, and this thing embedded itself clean into a tree. And they went over and had a look at it, and they were like, we can't have you with these here. So the military confiscated my bow off me and all of my arrowheads and everything. And I was gutted. And my dad went and seen them and they gave them back and they were like, "You should really take him to a club." So he was like, "All right, I'll take him to a club." And I got into archery, and I was really, really talented at it. I was quite a natural. So at the age of 12, I started shooting for Northern Ireland junior team. By the age of 14, I'd represented already the Northern Ireland senior team. So, you know, I was just smashing out all of these records. Came second a couple of times in the British Championships, you know, multiple British records, flipping dozens of Northern Ireland records, not even exaggerating. And then I wasn't sleeping very well, so I started to get into archery, and you know, it was just all of the equipment set up and stuff like that there, and it wasn't anything unsettling that was keeping me awake at night. I was just a bit of an insomniac. And,
this is back to when you recovered from your spleen, is that right?
Yeah, recovering from a spleen. So yeah, not a lot going on and flipping, you know, just lots of time. I was the CO's driver, so I had a bit of time and stuff in the evening. So I started shooting again archery over in the UK. I joined a local club. They had a 24-hour accessible indoor unit.
Okay.
Got a set of keys to it, and I just embraced it and flipping started shooting again. Flipping straight back in again, shooting insane levels. Like you know archery, so I was shooting 580, 590 Portsmouth just straight off the bounce.
Wow.
You know, I had like a 299 half Portsmouth, which is, you know, only 1 in the 9. You know, so it was just insane. And I then started to do the tournament routes, won the Hampshire Championships, started to beat or compete with a lot of the sponsored archers in the area. And in 2010, archery was going to be in the Commonwealth Games. So we're about 2.5 years out. And I got a notice from the Northern Ireland Archery Squad that it was on the radar. I would be invited to come to the qualification shoots, and there was potential for me to represent Northern Ireland archery at the Commonwealth Games. And that's insane because the last time archery had been in the Commonwealth Games was 1982. So
right.
This was
Yeah.
this was a singular window. And if I'm really, really honest, I believe I was good enough to make the Northern Ireland squad for the Commonwealths. I'm not talented enough to make the British squad for the Olympics. And
Okay.
that's me being really, really honest. So to shoot at that insane level,
Yeah.
this was my one opportunity. So yeah, something I obsessively got into.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're trying to do that as well as trying to get prepared to go to Afghanistan for the second time. So are you being pulled in two directions, or once this comes up, you know you're going for it?
So anytime I wasn't training, I was shooting.
Okay.
And that was it. But my training, the military, always the highest priority.
Okay.
By far. But I did speak to my unit and I said, got this letter. You know, they want me to potentially be on the trials. What's the chances? And they replied to me. They said, look, we think you're going to be in the Armoured Infantry Company. They're going to be based in Bastion. We'll get your equipment out there. We'll get you a target out there. You'll be able to shoot any time when you're not out on operations. And I was like, perfect, ideal. So I could still do my job out there. I could still be an AC within a fire support team, but I could still train for Commonwealth Games. So I was like, that sounds like the best of both worlds. I spoke to the bow manufacturers. I got in touch with what's his name? One of the guys from Hoyt. And I was like, 45, 50 degrees, direct sunlight. Is it okay? And they were like, we think these ones will be all right. They do Texas, they'll be okay, but don't just leave them out. Don't leave them strung up and stuff. They give me a few precautions and stuff. But yeah, everything looked like there was potential for it all to come off.
Nice.
And then I got sent to Afghan.
Yeah.
And I wasn't in an armoured infantry company.
Oh, okay.
They decided that we didn't have enough logistic support and capability, so we actually got stuck into a small patrol base just outside of Musakala. The compound was probably 20 meters by 20 meters. So no chance of putting a target up in it. The compound was under constant attack. We were isolated, and we had very little to no mutual support from any other call sign. So this was in all intents and purposes a bit of an Alamo.
Right.
Enemy could have hit us from any side at any time, at a time and of their pleasure.
Okay.
So we had trained for armour fighting. We are out in the ground, putting boots on the ground, one step in front of the other. Unbelievable.
Shit.
Yeah.
So you weren't doing much calling in of artillery at that point, or?
Daily.
Oh, it was daily,
Yeah.
right? So you were still you doing your job,
multiple times a day.
Right.
Yeah. So we got put into a place just south of Musakala. It was a patrol base called Ubraj, named after sadly a Nepalese soldier who had been killed in action. We had a company house where we did base security, we did QRF, and we did patrols from. We had a platoon house, which is where we put a platoon embedded into it, and they would be our southern flank, our southern protection, and they would just fight off any enemy incursions up from the south. And then we had an A&A omelette team beside us, who had one guy from our teams in there, embedded with the A&A. And we had a member of UK Special Forces attached to our team as well.
Okay.
And it's the closest that I think we could have come to the likes of fighting in World War I, where you've got enemy, you've got friendlies. If you go into no man's land, and that's actually what we nicknamed some of the area. If you go into no man's land, you're going to have a fight. They had trenches up there. They had bunkers. They had overhead protection. They had rat runs. They had mortars in support. They had great lines of logistics, minefields. It was insane, mate. And for 6 months previous, it was 2-9 Commando and the Fusiliers had been up in that area under 3 Commando Brigade. They just fought each other to stalemate. So
really?
it had all just stopped. And like, just the buildings that we were part of, like, we were in it for a couple of days, and then a patrol passed it one day, and the boss, the platoon commander, turned around and went, "Paddy, look back at our base." And I looked back at it, and the whole wall was just spattered. Just marks of RPGs, rounds where it cratered into it and everything. The whole place was just rattled. And yeah, you just see how intense and how insane the months before had been for the guys. Yeah.
Bloody hell.
Our intent was, as soon as we got there, we do not accept the status quo. We are going to put you on the back foot, and we're going to patrol aggressively.
Okay.
And we're going to follow you up every single time you come to meet us on the battlefield. We will follow you ruthlessly. So that was our intent as a small company.
Was the aim to be there for a period of time, or was you there for longer than you were meant to be there?
I had no idea of the intent.
You had no intent.
I don't think the company commander had an idea of the intent.
Right.
We were controlling an area the size of Wales in Afghanistan, as in British forces. And I think we had about 4,500 fighting troops to do it, which is just ridiculous. So there was a horrible thing about Afghan where you could fight through ground and you could gain it, but you wouldn't have the resource to be able to hold it. So you'd just pull back and you'd lose the ground again.
Yeah.
So what we wanted to do was make sure that any ground that we did take, it was manageable. And the ground commanders, the guys from 2 Royal Welsh I were working with tactically, they were fantastic. They were all over it. And they came up with their own intent of what they were going to do, and the plan was gleaming. But the village that we moved to, which was just south of that little patrol base, the civilians had moved out. And after only a week of us being there, they came up to us and they said, "Can you take our village back? We don't want anything to do with the Taliban. Can you move the Taliban out?" And the ground commander looked at it, done his combat estimate, decided we needed about 1,000 troops, I think it was, to fight through this village. And on a combat fighting patrol, we only had 30. So he was like, we can't fight through it. You know, what do we do? And he turned around and he was like, yeah, I propose we do like a shaping operation. We move in under the cover of darkness. We'll take over 5 compounds. And then hopefully whenever the Taliban see us, they'll move out. So we'll move in, they'll move out. Job done. And that was the 14th of March 2009 that we moved in on that op. We took over the 5 compounds. We should have known. We should have known quickly because for some reason these compounds just soaked up our personnel. I don't know how it did it, but we got to compound 3, and all of a sudden I found myself kicking in a door and being the first through a compound. And whenever I looked around, there was the platoon commander and the FST commander behind me. So we were actually clearing compound as point people. Should never happen. We should always be that tactical, strategic bit at the back of the patrol. And for some reason, these compounds just ate up how many people we had. Yeah, it was a nice safe room clearance. Went through all of the drills. I placed myself in one building. The forward troops, they went forward. I managed to get that tactical bound behind them again. They went forward into a compound that we call Compound 1. And the plan was they would go no further forward. That would be the limit of exploitation. And all we would do is set up on these positions and just let the Taliban see us. And then they'd fuck off. And no plan survives first contact with the enemy.